Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this digital edition of Water Innovation Europe 2021, which is this year dedicated to the theme of a water smart society for global leadership. Over the next week, we will be joined by 500 people over Zoom and more than 1,000 people who have registered for the web stream over LinkedIn. In these 5 days, we have composed for you, I think, a great program with every day a keynote, Water Innovation Awards, a panel discussion, 6 side events in total in the afternoon, and of course the Water Europe working groups who are meeting back to back with this event the last week and the week afterwards. I think in total we have a great lineup of keynote speakers, panelists and award winners. And with this brief introduction, I would like to give the floor now to Thomas Michel, President of Water Europe.
Thank you, Dirk. And good morning to everybody. Welcome for one more year to the most important water event in Europe. We're presenting a 5-day full digital event in the hope that next year we can do this in a mixed format. And I say a mixed format because digital has proven really interesting and valuable alternative to communicate and collaborate amongst each other. And so digital, therefore, has clearly come to stay. Water Europe continues to grow and becoming more visible. Since 2004, and that's already for 17 years, membership and activities of this organization have continuously grown and evolved in line with our ambition to present the whole value chain and achieve a European water smart society. Water and its central importance continue to be more and more recognized. This means that we're actually getting the job done year after year. But as the motto of this year's conference indicates, we are absolutely need still to insist that water is everybody's business. Allow me to say a couple words regarding Water Europe and this past year and years to come. Water Europe is becoming bigger, stronger, and most of all, more useful. We are starting this year a new programming period, which means we're going to revise the previous results, establish new goals. For this, our most important collaboration tool, where our members really can chip in and collaborate. We will also be starting a customer experience journey, where we got the help of Capgemini, because we need your input. We care about you. We need to know what you feel, what you think, and what you would like to see. Regarding Horizon Europe, we are more focused, more efficient in the single most important EU financing program for RTD. And we also leave our footprint in large collaboration programs such as Water for All and Process for Planet. We would also like to contribute to the best of our means with the national recovery and resilience plans, because if water is everybody's business, then water must form part of these plans. And last but not least, this year, we clearly have decided strategically to move ahead, forcing the knowledge that we help to generate and to create into the market and into society. And so here our motto is from living labs to water-oriented living labs to Water Europe living labs. And water is everybody's business. So these are 3 words and 3 key messages. The centrality of water, of course. Everybody means everybody, talking about industry, rural environment, society at large. And business. Business means creation of value. So along the week, we will be talking on Monday about breaking silos of environment, economy, and health, and try to make all these work as one. Then on Tuesday, moving to the side of industry and ask us the question, how does a water smart industry contribute to the Green Deal? Because water, the Green Deal, are problems for industry regarding competitiveness, autonomy, and very importantly, resilience. Water is a matter of quality of life. And so on Wednesday, we'll be looking at urban and rural water reuse and ask ourselves how can water reuse, hybrid green infrastructure, and digital water benefit the rural and urban environment. As I said, we need to get the knowledge to the market. And after the big success we have had with Horizon 2020, we need now to deploy a strategy which brings these results into practice. So this is all about governance, citizens, and all other stakeholders involved. So Living Labs is our big bet regarding this challenge. And at the end of the week and Friday, we're going to look at Water Smart EU and global impact. With COVID, climate change, they present problems for the EU, problems of autonomy and leadership. The EU really is a very large water user. 90% of our economy needs water, and 50% of Europe's water footprint is actually imported. That is why water is everybody's business. The week will also showcase our 5 innovation awards. We will introduce and celebrate a new honorary Water Europe member. We have 3 side events, and there will be our General Assembly towards the end of the week. So all of this makes for a challenging and inspiring week. So don't miss out and connect. I want to wish all of you attending throughout the week a pleasant, interesting, and valuable experience. I also wish for 2021 to be again an excellent year for water. And I hope that with COVID under better control, we can start to meet again in person in 2022. Before introducing, however, the next keynote speaker, allow me to recognize and thank the Water Europe team, and of course, all speakers and participants, all who have contributed to the organization and guaranteed success of this event. Without you, this would be all impossible. And with this, I would like to hand over the floor to Commissioner Sinkevicius, European Commissioner for Environment, Oceans, and Fisheries, who I want to thank very much for addressing Water Europe in this occasion. Have a very nice day. The floor is yours, Commissioner Sinkevicius.
President Michel, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to support Water Europe. Your ambitious, multi-stakeholder platform has continued to grow ever since the Commission promoted its launch in 2004. You are doing great work, bringing together water service providers, technology providers, users, public authorities, and civil society. Today, more than ever, we need a Europe that restores and protects its water resources. And with the European Green Deal at the heart of EU water policy, collaborative structures like yours are more important than ever before. The Green Deal is the top political priority of this Commission and is also our strategy for recovery. The aim is transformation, address the main environmental crisis we face and set Europe on a sustainable path. Climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, resource depletion, they are all interrelated. They all affect each other and they all affect water. The European Green Deal offers a systemic response and brings tools to change the way we produce and consume. In practice, for a resource like water, that means a willingness to address connections, to address land planning, mobility, food and energy systems, at the same time assessing the impacts and looking for multiple wins. It means tackling today's water challenges. More frequent extreme events, droughts and floods, chemical and nutrients pollution, water scarcity and soil degradation. It means becoming more resource efficient, reducing pollution at source, promoting nature-based solutions such as restoring wetlands, rivers and soils from changing the way we farm. It means generally working with nature, not against it, and make a smart use technologies, especially digital technologies. It means bringing people together to share knowledge, expertise, and solutions. So where are we today and what should look out for? Compared to 2 decades ago, we have made progress on water quality. If our fresh waters are cleaner, that's mainly due to ambitious objectives in EU law. The Water Framework Directive, of course, but also the huge investments in wastewater treatment spurred by EU law. But there is still plenty of room for improvement. Under the European Green Deal, we have launched a number of initiatives where water plays a central role. The first of these is the Circular Economy Action Plan. The aim is to promote water efficiency and reuse and incentivize companies to embark in water saving, restoring water resources and protecting nature. Then the EU biodiversity strategy, it provides new ambitious targets to step up the protection of aquatic ecosystems. We want to improve ecological flows, restore rivers to a free-flowing state, protect ecosystems like wetlands, and prioritize nature-based solutions that will largely contribute to better water quality and water regulation. On the Farm to Fork strategy for sustainable food, we are setting targets to reduce nutrients and pesticides and build up organic farming. And we are calling for ambitious eco-schemes, investments, and advisory services in the Common Agricultural Policy, with knock-on effects for water. There are multiple actions under the climate adaptation strategy to improve coherence in water planning, cutting the demand for water, managing the risks of droughts and floods, securing supplies of drinking water, and more sustainable land use. Finally, the Zero Pollution Action Plan. Water is one of the main strands of this plan and foresees reviewing the lists of pollutants in ground and surface waters. We want to move away from substances that endanger health in the short or longer term. That means action downstream at wastewater treatment plants and upstream as well, where substances are produced. We have also policy reviews underway. The Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive will promote enhanced efficiency for water energy and resources, while harnessing the potential of sewage sludge. We are assessing a wide range of policy measures, including extended producer responsibility, better management of stormwater overflows, and tackling emerging pollutants. We are counting on your input to the public consultation. We are also evaluating the Sewage Sludge Directive, analyzing risks and opportunities related to sludge management, notably in farming. We are looking at regulating sludge pollutants like microplastics, at pharmaceuticals. Early next year, we will propose a revision of the Industrial Emissions Directive, a major instrument for preventing pollution and promoting innovation as it covers over 50,000 agro-industrial installations. There are numerous implications for water, such as tighter emission limits at the EU and national level, and a better interplay with the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive to do a better job of tackling industrial releases to water. We also foresee performance benchmarks for water efficiency and for water reuse, and an enhanced role for environmental management systems to drive constant improvements. We are also considering widening the scope and improve key provisions on permits and controls and ensure more effective access to environmental information and participation in decision-making of civil society. I have talked a lot about the European Green Deal, but it's hard to overstate its significance. It paves the way towards societal change. The overarching goal is a shift towards a regenerative economic model, where we give back more than we take away. A model that delivers healthier ecosystems, greener cities, more active rural areas, and better jobs. And now we have the firepower to make it happen. On 31st of May, the member states gave a green light to the own resources decision. That day was genuinely historic. It means that the Commission is now empowered to borrow up to 750 billion euro from the financial markets to support the recovery. Only 2 years ago, a boost like this for the green, blue, digital transition was quite simply unthinkable. Water has to be part of this transition. We need innovative solutions, ambitious measures for water management, active participation, and strategic partnership among business, administrations, researchers, and civil society. We have long-standing experienced businesses, research institutions, and NGOs who master water treatment, water reuse, restoration practices, and nature-based solutions. This expertise is precisely what we need. I know You are aware of the challenges ahead and best practices to share the knowledge and the game-changing innovations that Europe needs. Do not keep them to yourself. I am counting on you all to seize the moment. The moment to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sienkiewicz, for these, I would say, inspiring words, but also for this great overview of, I would say, the state of play of European water-related legislation and policies upcoming. Then now we will pass to the next part of the program, which is the Water Europe Innovation Awards. And the first award is the Water Smart MEP Award, which will be handed over by Water Europe President Thomas Michel. Thomas?
Okay, thanks, Dirk. This year's MEP Innovation Award goes to Christoph Hansen. We try to honor and celebrate somebody that has really shown involvement regarding water and water legislation. So as such, Mr. Hansen has been rapporteur on the Drinking Water Directive and also author of an own initiative calling on the Commission and member states to improve and better implement water legislation. Unfortunately, despite our efforts, it has been not possible to reach him today, and so he cannot be with us, but I hereby transfer and confirm this MEP Water Prize to Mr. Christoph Hansen. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And then we go to our digital award, which will be presented by Andres Lucht from DECIMA, one of the participants to the European Junior Water Program. Andres?
Hi, good morning, everybody. So, yeah. So I'm happy to announce the Digital Water Award. I'm from DECIMA, Germany, leading institute for research in biotechnology and process engineering, and also participant at the European Junior Water Program. And so in this case, I'm happy to announce the AM team, and they have a very nice project on oxidation and advanced oxidation process with their Amazon product. And so Wim Oudenaar, please.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, everybody, joining here, and Water Innovation Europe for giving us this award. I think it's very nice for our team, our whole team that worked on this. It's very nice for our customers that trusted us in this whole development project. And it's also nice for our partners. So yeah, we are truly honored. Digital water has become very important. We are talking a lot about it, digitalization solutions. I can start with a small story. I was at an international conference in Switzerland 3 years ago, and I was presenting our idea. Back then, it was still quite an idea. We didn't have a tangible solution yet. And somebody stood up from the audience. It was an internationally very well-known expert, a really well-known person. And that person said, guys, what you are going to try is, I think, impossible. It is way too difficult. It's way too complex. And well, if there's one thing you should not say to an innovative young company, it is that things are impossible. So we worked even harder on that. And I think innovation is all about the right partners. It's all about the right teams and the right vision, and then going for it. So in this case, we created quite a disruptive innovation, I think. A disruptive innovation is what I think the way of working before the innovation is not the same anymore than the way of working after the innovation. That is kind of a disruptive innovation. And I think we need more in the water industry. They are not easy to create, but I think there is so many opportunities in the digital space to create them, because we will need them a lot. If we're talking about process models, mathematics, well, in this case, we have created a bunch of equations. That's the innovation here. It's a bunch of equations that does something that was impossible before. A quote I like very much, if you look at predictions, is one by Jim Collins from the book Good to Great. And he says, we cannot predict the future, but we can create it. And this is something I really believe in. We can create the future. So something about Amazon. So we now, 3 years after that event, we have Amazon, which is our innovative tool by our company AM team. And we are literally saving our customers hundreds of thousands of euros and years of man hours, years of testing time with a bunch of mathematical equations. So what you see on the screen is a virtual ozonation plant. So it's not a real one, but actually it works like a real one. You have some water coming in with a certain flow rate and quality. You want to ozonate, for example, to remove some pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are very hard to measure because they are very low in concentrations. This is why they are called micropollutants. And then you want to predict them, but it's so hard. You have no sensors. You have such unreliable and costly measurements, and then you have a model that can finally predict it in nearly real time. Same with bromate and things like that. But that's really the science behind that. So the model is currently used to actually replace completely or partially physical piloting and trialing by computer simulation. So this is what we call virtual piloting. It's quite disruptive if you're a practitioner, trusting a model instead of a real pilot. Second, we use the model to design plants, full-scale plants, to design them much smarter. And then the third one is the operational stage. We use the model as a digital twin. So digital twins, yeah, the word is used often, but actually you are predicting variables you want to know, but you cannot measure based on variables you can measure. That's actually how it is used, this model. What's left for me is, so it's actually testing what you cannot test with the model, predicting what you cannot measure with the model, and learning what used to be unknown. So I really want to thank all of our partners that are on this slide with all of the logos. These are early innovators. These are early customers, early partners. For example, Dynamita in France, Dunea in the Netherlands, HRSD in the US with their innovative Swift reuse project. For example, water reuse is really emerging also in Europe, also at the potable side. Yeah, so these are all inspiring partners to work with. Xylem, HHNK in the Netherlands, Delfront Utility, Waterschap de Dommel, PWN, Techniska Werken in Sweden, which is the first full scale in Sweden. And also our team, of course, and specifically Giacomo Bellandi and Roberta Muyo, which I really have spent a lot of hours in this tool. So thanks so much for this award again. And yeah, we will talk to all of our team members and partners and bring forward the message about it. So thanks again, Water Innovation Europe.
Very good, Wim. We're very happy that we've been able to hand over this award to you, and we do really indeed wish you a lot of success, I would say, in the upcoming time. And of course, we'll be helping you to spread the word and disseminate the good results. I think a very well deserved award. Thank you also, Andres, for doing the introduction.
Thank you.
I must say that we find ourselves now in a very exceptional situation for Water Innovation Europe, because for once we're ahead of time, which I think is very good, because next on the program is our first panel session, Water is Also Your Business. I think where we have, I would say, a very strong moderator and a very strong set of speakers. So I'm very happy that actually we have ample time for this panel. And I would like to invite the moderator, Joachim de Genio, to take the floor and to introduce his panel.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dirk. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'm really delighted to be here, and even more delighted that we have more time now for discussion, because I hope we can have a discussion about the topic "Water is also your business," which is the name of the session that interests all of you participating. And the first thing I would like to say is that you can participate through sending text or questions or comments through the chat. So I think that would be very useful if you start thinking on them already or sharing them with us. We would be happy to pick them up later on in the discussion. I should probably say a few words about my name and my background. I'm Joachim Dirigenio from the European Commission, working in DG Environment's Directorate for Quality of Life, who is the Directorate for dealing with water and marine issues, as well as air quality and industrial emissions. And of course, we're dealing there with all the water-related aspects. And one particular job that I've been involved in recently is help prepare the Zero Pollution Action Plan for air, water, and soil that you have heard from the Commission earlier about, and that we finally adopted on the 12th of May. I'm delighted to be here to discuss a little bit with the business community, because I think one of the key points that also Commissioner made is that we have to bring along the innovative power, the creative power, the economic actors who are making the difference on the ground, both in terms of addressing the challenges that exist, but also transforming our societies, our economies into a green, climate neutral, circular, and zero pollution Europe by 2050. I think that's the vision that we have, and I think the business community plays a huge part in this. Therefore, I'm very delighted that we have two excellent speakers in this panel, and I hope they are with me now. First of all, I would like to introduce Adina Braha-Honcic from Microsoft, who is in the European Government Affairs Department, is a Senior Manager for Sustainability Policy. Adina, are you there? Want to say hello to everybody?
Yes. Hi, Joachim. Thank you for the nice introduction. Here I am. I hope you can all see me.
Yeah, we can see you, we can hear. That's very good, excellent. Hi, Adina, very good to have you. We'll go a little bit, talk in a bit more detail about what you do and what Microsoft is doing in a minute. But I first want to introduce Mauro Scaglia. He is working for Eurotex and is their Director for Sustainable Businesses, and therefore another important sector that certainly has a lot to say when it comes to water challenges and solutions. Mauro, are you there?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Joachim. Can you hear me fine?
All is well. That's very Excellent. Good. We have. I see you both already very energetic and ready for starting early. We've been all following the session, and we're then called on to be there early. I see you full of energy, because we now have to make it as interesting, as lively and interactive as possible for the audience in the next 1.5 hours. And yes, coffee is therefore needed. I hope everybody at home has a coffee as well. Let me start a little bit by asking you a little bit about your background, what you're doing, and what you're doing in the company, specifically on the issues that are on the agenda. I think what is important that we discuss in general terms, that's the intention, that we can start in general terms with the general challenges and water-related opportunities. And in the second part of our discussion, we will zoom into a little bit more into digitization. And as I said, I repeat myself, to the audience, please do send in comments, questions, anything you would like to know. We can try to bring that in as we go along. Shall I start with Mauro maybe, and ask you first, Mauro, how is it that Eurotex gets involved in water business and water issues? What are the main challenges? What are you doing from the textiles industry on these challenges, and what is your perspective in terms of water-related agenda over the next 10 to 20 years? Please, Mauro.
With pleasure. I also understand you asked us to give a little bit of introduction, so maybe yes, I should also give, okay, just to understand a few words about Myself and Euradex mostly, as you said, I am director for the Sustainable Businesses Department, which is the part of the Euradex which deals with anything related to sustainability, from circular economy to chemical legislation to energy and climate change to due diligence and so on and so forth. It's an exciting area to work in, because right now we are in the middle of what one of your colleagues, actually, Joachim, called a big bang of legislation on textiles, which is due to be delivered by the end of this year. The textile industry is so much into the policy agenda for the transformation which is happening in the sector, based on the fact that it is a resource-intensive sector industry. And it has pioneer action, especially in the European Union, on circular economy. Is in the middle of very strong transformation from chemical legislation. And water, of course, it's part of both these points that I just mentioned. On a bigger level, on a step backwards, if you like, we represent the whole European textile and apparel industry, manufacturing part, which covers anything from a fiber, which can be made of cotton or polyester, to the yarn, to the fabric, to treatment of the fabric. It's called finishing in textile. It's very important when you color a fabric or when you give special properties where water plays a key role, to the finished product, which can be a garment like we all wear now, to home textile, or even very highly technical products such as a filter used in the car. Ventilation systems, or the wings of a large planes are made with textile materials. The windmill blades are also made textile because of strong and light. So a lot of people associate textile to garments, which is partially true, but it's much more on technical aspects related to this industry. Not to mention also high performance textiles, which are used in sports for athletes and so on and so forth. That's a little bit of introduction. We represent more than 160,000 companies in the European Union only, 1.5 million workers, so it's very, very large. And as I was mentioning, it's just in the middle of transformation. Now, water is a resource which is fundamental all over the value chain. I mean, with water, you grow as part of the raw material that our industry process. With water, you treat the fabrics. So you make possible for a fabric to have a different color or a different function. It can be dirt repellent, water repellent. It can be long lasting, so it can enhance the duration, which is also in line with the circular economy. And of course, water is a resource used in the companies, and it is very, on the one side, is very strictly regulated. So there is now a very intense process of updating what are the emissions of chemicals, for instance, they can release into water. There you need water treatment technologies or water treatment infrastructures. You need to work together with other companies or wastewater treatment plants. So that is one aspect. You also might wish to recycle the water internally to the extent that is possible. And that's also open a frontier of very interesting aspects to cooperate with technology providers. And in some aspects, you also have developments on water-free technologies, which basically reduce the use of water in itself. So I would say the reason why, and coming back to your first question, why we involve in water treatment water-related projects, it's first of all to help understanding what are the possibilities to improve water treatments inside the companies, what are the data that you need, what are the aspects that you need to consider, what the technology progresses, and how all of that can feed also legislation. Because as I was mentioning, there are so many policy action now happening, from circular economy to the so-called industrial emission directives, which regulate emission to water. We need to be part of this project because we need to learn at the company level, really look at the buffer tank sometime, or the wastewater treatment technologies, when it works and when it doesn't work in a company, what can be done to make it work, how can policymakers help to make it work, and when also is the best way of treating the technology. Sometimes you might have to treat it inside the company, sometimes you don't want to do that, or they're actually even forbidden by law, because the wastewater treatment plants down the river can process that much better way. So in a nutshell, just as an introductory statements, we are very happy to be, first of all, invited today in this discussion. Water is a key resource for the textile industry. it is in the middle of a transformation process, the whole industry. It has also a very high degree of attention from the policymakers, which can help us in making the right choices. And I trust on the digital part and the link between wastewater treatment technologies and water in general and digital technologies in the companies. I trust we're going to dig in this morning conversation. So perhaps as an introductory statement, I would pause here for a moment.
Thanks a lot, Mauro. We covered a lot of ground, and before going to Adina, just let me just check two things to get that clear to the audience in terms of from your perspective. So I think obviously you made it very clear that producing textiles is a water business, so to say. You need water in the production process, and so I guess water consumption and water pollution are the two big issues that you're addressing. Could you define for the overview that you have in terms of the 160,000 companies, what is currently the water consumption challenge, the biggest water consumption challenge, and what is the biggest water pollution challenge? Is that something that you can synthesize from your experience?
Okay, it's very difficult to answer this question. Let me try to do that, but let me be clear with you. When we say 160,000 companies, some produce garments, some produce windmills, blades for a windmill. So having very diverse type of industry segment is not the one challenge. Different companies have different challenges based on where they are in the production side. If you only make a yarn, just a tiny yarn, you probably don't have a challenges on water. Water is not an issue. Even if you assemble a garment, if you stitch together or glue or seal off a garment, you have no business with water. If you make finishing, if you make some part of wet-based processes, then you have an issue with water. Water is your business, as this session is titled about. The biggest challenge could be that you have environmental legislation asking you to be more and more careful on how you use your water in your company. Ask you to reduce more and more the threshold, to lower the threshold for what type of hazardous chemicals, when you use them, you can release in the wastewater treatment plants, you can hand it over to the wastewater treatment plants. So their companies need to understand what technologies they can use to change their business process and how can they afford those technologies. So the biggest change is about the environmental pressures of more legislation asking you to be more and more cautious and careful. And as we say, often legislation as a paradox goes faster than technology, because to understand which technology works in your process and how a technology impact on different chemicals or different processes that you have, you need to do a lot of tests. And that's, I think, is the biggest lesson learned we learned from the projects. And I can mention three of them: Vasatex, Equity, and Dentreat. These are all research projects, some of them co-funded by Life Instrument of DG Environment, some non. You don't have in textile, and that's the second challenge, answering your question, you don't have a technology which is just plug and play. I mean, today I install a router in this room and I have internet connection done. And I can use with any laptop and any phones if I want to. When it comes to textile manufacturing, you need to adjust any technology to the production processes, which also change every day, every week, every month. If in June you produce more for jackets, consumer goods, then you need to use certain type of technologies. If the next week you produce a completely different type of product, then you need to adjust your wastewater treatment recipes or technologies to that process. So in a short answer, the biggest challenge when it comes to how to deal with this water pressure, it's about how do you make sure you have the right technologies, you can afford these technologies, and you can apply to your production process and still remain competitive, which is every company's, of course, need to keep operating in the market. Does that answer your question, or was too long in my details at this stage?
No, I think it was very good to get a sense of the diversity of your industries, because I think, I mean, we talk about the textile industry, but we made it very clear that we're not talking about one homogeneous set of actors that are facing the same challenges and therefore looking at the same type of solutions. I think we come to opportunities and solutions in more detail a bit later, but before we do that, let me go to Adina and welcome her into the discussion. And I think that the interesting part I will find later on is that we try to connect also the two different industries that you're working in. And Adina is obviously working for Microsoft, part of the digital sector, Also, that sector is becoming increasingly active in the water sector, and I would be equally interested to hear an introduction from Adina. Tell me a little bit more about Microsoft, what Microsoft is doing, and why is water your business, and what are the challenges that you face most in your area? Please, Adina, you've got the floor.
Great, thank you, Akim, and thank you, Maura, for the great presentation as well. So my name is Adina Braha. I'm part of Microsoft's sustainability policy team in Brussels. I'm an economist, and I've been with the company for about 9 years, and I'm working with an amazing team of sustainability experts also across our headquarters. I'm so glad to be here with you and talk about water and such a timely and important conversation, and just to kind of get across, why we started to invest and talk more about water and kind of what we've learned in our journey so far. But just to go a step back, in January 2020, we announced a really bold sustainability commitment and a new strategy for sustainability across the company. So we've put forward a detailed plan to be carbon negative by 2030 and to remove from the environment all the carbon that the company emitted since we were founded, and to do that by 2050. And what we've done over the past year was to build on that pledge by announcing a series of commitments. One of them was to be water positive by 2030. Another one was to be zero waste by 2030. And the third was to protect ecosystems and develop a planetary computer to better use data to understand and protect ecosystem. So just to say that our water commitment and our work on water is really part of that bigger strategy and sustainability work that we started at Microsoft at the beginning of 2020. And just to go on the water specifically, water is so important for our operations. It's clear that getting ahead of the water crisis that everyone has talked about and all the statistics that we discussed will require a significant reduction in the amount of water that we use, both as a company, but also in generally in economies, to how we operate our economies, our societies, while also ensuring there is sufficient and clean water for all. And that this requires an incredible transformation in our view in the way water data is also collected and managed, the way we understand what's happening, the way we build solutions and approaches to water, and just a concerted effort from all organizations to properly account for the water use and to balance their water use. So this, cross-sectoral conversation and collaboration is all the more important in terms of understanding what's happening and addressing water issues. And in terms of Microsoft specifically, we believe our role is twofold. One relates, as you said, Joachim, to the responsibility to address the water footprint of our operations. And the second is developing technology and innovations to help others understand the water challenges. So in terms of kind of the challenges in our operations and how we're taking responsibility for our water footprint, our commitment to be water positive means that we want to reduce our water use intensity and we want to replenish water in water-stressed region. So this means that by 2030, we want to replenish more water than we consume on a global basis. So we want to put back into the ecosystem more water that we consume. And again, I can go in further detail into how we're planning to do that now or later in our conversation. And just on the second step, we actually believe that our most important contribution to water challenges will come not from our work alone, but as a digital company and a company that is focused on developing technology and innovation, our most important contribution will perhaps come from working with customers, with partners, with suppliers, to help them build solutions, to help them understand water-related risks due to climate change and make smarter decisions about water use, and really help them improve water quality and conservation, and do that that quicker as well, because that's what technology can enable, to do things that would, in the past take years maybe to do those things, those assessments much quicker and take more timely decisions. Maybe I'll stop here and get your reactions and questions.
Oh, that's great. It gave us a good flavor already. And I think what I just want to establish in the beginning is really what are the challenges that we are facing, that you're facing with now. And so the same question to you. So if you would say from an environmental and a water perspective, I mean, what's the biggest challenges? And maybe if I am a bit more concrete as well, you want to become water positive. That sounds positive, but that implies that you're water negative at the moment. So what is actually, I mean, I was not imagining immediately until I started digging a little bit deeper into digital solutions and so on, that not only Microsoft, but the digital sector is such a big water consumer. Can you tell us a little bit more what Microsoft is struggling with in terms of its water consumption at the moment? So just to get a sense of the challenges that you're facing. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of our operational footprint, I guess concretely, one of the points that also came out from one of the studies is, around cooling for data center, which is something our industry uses water for. So while energy has received in the past the most attention, as the cloud is growing and digital solutions are growing, we know that data centers generate heat, and this is typically addressed by using water for cooling. So this is one of the areas where, as Microsoft, as a data center and cloud provider, that's where we would be using water. So we've been taking different steps in the past decade to minimize our water consumption, including different approaches to fresh water, adiabatic cooling. So there's a lot of innovation happening in that space. And the objective is both kind of to optimize energy and water in the most efficient way, in a way that respects and takes into account the local climate, and while still delivering that maximum computer power and performance. And the innovation in this space is just set to dramatically change the way water is used for data center cooling and operations. And really I guess the dream and the goal is that water will not be used for cooling data centers in the future. So that's the direction we're going into. To give you an example, there are some extraordinary innovations in this field. Some of our new data centers would be using zero water for cooling for more than half of the year, leveraging some methods called, adiabatic cooling. So this uses outside air, so fresh air basically instead of water for cooling when temperatures are below, 29 degrees. So it's probably in Europe quite a lot of the time. When temperatures are above that, we would be using and working on an evaporative cooling system, which is called a swamp cooler, that you can find now in residential homes. And this system is highly efficient, uses less electricity, and uses up to 90% less water than water-based cooling systems like the cooling towers, for example. So a lot of the challenges we have today around data center cooling, we think will be solved by a lot of the innovation that is happening in this space, using outside air cooling, using evaporative cooling, or even research projects we've had around underwater cooling, or under the sea cooling. So that's kind of how we're thinking about addressing these challenges. And until we get there, our strategy is to replenish the water that we use. So to get to this positive or kind of the net, so giving back more than we use. And what that means is to work with partners around restoring wetlands, for example, or making sure that the water, that there are old wetlands, for example, that kind of there are different paths. For example, there's asphalt in the way, and there's very hard for kind of the water to be replenished in that space. So one method is to take out that asphalt or kind of that materials that are standing in the way of that, wetland to be restored. So we're working with different partners and coalitions, like with the World Resource Institute, to understand what are the most water-stressed regions in the world, and make sure that we are replenishing those water-stressed basins, where that is needed, and we're matching that with the areas where we have operations as well. So that's kind of the two sides of our strategy: the minimization side, so getting to hopefully zero until 2030, and until then replenishing the water that we use.
Thanks, excellent. Look, there are questions coming in. That is fantastic, and I will pick them up already. And I have one from Mauro in a minute, but the one that comes from Peter de Jong I think fits well with what you just explained. And I think you alluded to that already, but maybe you can elaborate again a bit more. He says air cooling requires more water than water cooling. Is that really in your mind, back in your mind? Is that the direction that you're thinking of? Or I mean, you gave some examples already what the directions you're doing, but maybe you can go into that a little bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in cooling, but what we talked about is using outside air. So we wouldn't be cooling the air. The air would be at the right temperature to cool our data centers. And the evaporative cooling, so the swamp cooler is different than air cooling, from my understanding. So those are kind of the new methods that we're looking into, and they're still under research. There are other methods, including immersive cooling, liquid cooling that doesn't use water. So there's a lot of innovations happening in this space.
Mm-hmm. And so just to keep it interactive, because questions are now really coming in, and people seem to be interested. I mean, I heard you saying you're not an expert, but still I'll put them to you.
Sure.
We can always, refer colleagues also to other places. But of course, something that makes a lot of sense to me, if I read Michael Blind's question, how about reusing the heat of data centers for example, domestic heating?
Yeah, and that's a big discussion happening now around data centers and with the Green Deal, and we're looking into that. There are certain places where you can do that in a way that saves the net energy. It depends on certain factors, having that residential, building an ecosystem around you, because if it's too far away, you actually use more energy to do that than you save. So in the areas where we can do that, and where it actually reduces the net energy consumption by reusing the waste heat, it's something our experts are looking into developing.
Excellent. Thanks, Adina. I think I want to pick up on that thread that now questions are coming in. I hope actually you guys can also see them. So please do not hesitate to also pick up the questions yourself when you speak, because we want to make that as close to those listening to us as possible. But Mauro, the next question would be for you, maybe so for Michael Blind as well, is how does the textile sector feel about responsibility for water use in the primary production, for example, in relation to cotton? Can you say something on that?
Well, let's say the European textile and apparel industry we represent has put sustainability as one of the main competitive elements in addition to quality and innovation, which are traditionally typical of this industry. And I know it might sound like a slogan, but just to give it in a very simple way, you have all sorts of textile products. And you have large consumer good products. You just go into a shopping street in Brussels or in every city where people are. And you see very often large volume of textile products being sold to consumers. Now, those which you make with large quantities, you don't make in Europe because they are far too expensive. The labor cost in Europe is too expensive. The water cost, the energy cost, any cost in Europe is way more expensive than in other world regions. So anything which is mid-quality or low quality of high water consumption or high resource consumption is simply not an economical rationale to be produced in Europe. Hence, you specialize on sustainable products, high quality products, consumer goods, high fashion style, for instance, luxury products, or very high performance products. So if you are in Europe, you are kind of driven towards a way to make your product better than the others. And sustainability is one of those for a number of reasons. First, because legislation already put you in that direction. You think about the REACH legislation on chemicals, one of the most stringent in the world, if not the most stringent in the world. The Industrial Emission Directive, many others, water, drinkable water. I mean, I don't need to elaborate on all those. So in a way, this is at the same time a pressure and an opportunity. And company says, we can even go one step beyond legislation or increase the requirements more than what the legislation asks us to do, so we become more sustainable. And especially as apparently there is a growing niche market, a growing market of consumer which asks for more sustainable products, then you can tell them, well, if you can prove your products are more sustainable, then actually you have an advantage. So the direct answer to your question is you deal with that simply for the fact where you produce, and you can make a competitive advantage out of that. Then you have the front runners, which is a part of the company, which really say, I'm gonna go for 100% water recycling in my companies, or I choose a type of cotton and not another type of cotton, for instance. That depends very much by the business and by the niche market and by what your consumer asks you to do. Because if your consumer is absolutely indifferent to sustainability issue, then it's more difficult to help them to buy your product on a sustainability claim, which they're not interested into. But the short answer to your question is, again, it's an opportunity, it's a pressure, and many choose to be front runner into that, really to differentiate. And just let me give you an image to that. If you think about the old-fashioned style textile, I mean, what used to be made in the 18th centuries, traditionally you have the textile district built close to rivers, because traditionally you use a lot of water to make textile products. Now, the situation now is different. I mean, the European textile industry is not the one that it used to be 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or 20 years ago. So there is a sense of consciousness on resources. There is an understanding that this can be a new business opportunity. And there are other regions of the world which they don't play along the same, which they don't follow this approach. So again, when you think about water and textile, also you should reflect upon what kind of textile product and which part of the world you're thinking of. I think these are important elements to be considered.
Or if I may chip in, I mean, you have already basically answered or half answered the question also that Sophie Vermorten had. She says the value of water, but also the vulnerability of the users to water-related risks is not the same depending on where you are in the world. And so her question earlier already was, how are you dealing with this in your sustainability strategy? So maybe Mauro, I want to understand really, are you having different approaches in different parts of the world, meaning also a different level of ambition? And I will have the same question to Adina in a minute, so to answer Sophie's question. So how are you going to go about this diversity of situations, but at the same time also, of course, diversity of regulation, diversity of ambition level, and so on?
I mean, we can have a conference only on this topic because this is.
I agree.
It's a key. It's
a good topic.
Short answer: we want and we advocate for global harmonized rules. That's the very short answer to your question. We need to have everybody playing with fair rules and the same rules, which may not be identical but has to be harmonized. Because any business has to deal with the cost, with the competitiveness, and with the regulation. That's normal, whether you make textile or glasses or cars or whatever. Now, if you have other countries which they don't have the same, let me be politically correct, degree of priorities, then of course production, and since we live in a free trade world, largely speaking, it is way more competitive to produce in a place and not in another place, for instance. So if you don't have harmonized rules, you might actually try to penalize those countries, continent, or world regions which try to have the stringent standards. So there is an element called level playing field. We want the business want everybody to play with the same rules, and that's one point. If everybody, let's say through OECD, UN sort of negotiation goes in the same direction, how you restrict harmful chemicals, how you define wastewater treatments needs, for instance, that helps everybody. if you don't have a harmonized approach, then you risk to penalize those more ambitious and those more conscious on sustainability. There is a whole slogan is that if somebody starts, for instance, in the European Union, others will follow. That's not actually what empiric experience tells us about. Again, if you don't play with the same rules, then you have problems. The second point related to that is that when you sell products in the European Union territories, you need to comply, of course, with EU legislation. However, the way European production are controlled, it's quite more stringent than in other parts of the world. And we don't have a good system for market surveillance. So Brussels make the rules, but every EU member state capitals decide how to control that their rules are respected. And if you think about it, when it comes to consumer good products, like jackets, for instance, every year you import about 23 billions of single items. Some of them are re-exported, but you import that amount and you produce in the EU 5 billion. So about 20% is here, 80% is imported. If you cannot control that the legislation is applied to those imported products in the same way, then again, you run the risk to have free riders, so those who don't respect the rules, and you cannot catch them. I hope that answered the question, and happy to dig in some part of that further on.
Yes, I'm sure also that, and I see already some colleagues are coming back with additional questions, which is good. That's exactly the type of interaction we want. But I think it was important to get that sense from you, Mauro. And I want to ask Adina the same thing. And maybe Adina, you've seen that building up on that question, Matthias van Ooybeek is asking, does actually Microsoft have an aspiration to become positive, water positive globally and per catchment? Or how is this on a catchment level when limited water resources are available? So if you can factor that in, because Microsoft obviously is a global company and you must face these challenges with different settings in different parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, let me start with that. So our commitment is global. So water positive means that we will return more water than we use and focus on the stressed basins. And when we looked at which stress basins should we prioritize, we want to match that with the areas where we have operations. So there is a direct match between Microsoft operations and the areas where we are returning water to the environment. We were making this assessment with the help of the World Resource Institute. It's a leading non-profit organization that focuses on natural resources. And they look at the kind of world's fresh water as divided into over 16,000 basins. And in their assessment, a basin is considered highly stressed if the amount of water withdrawn exceeds 40% of the renewable supply. So globally, there are over 4,000 basins that fall into that category, so more than 25% of the world's basins. So our focus on the replenishment strategy will focus on roughly 40 highly stressed basins where we have operations. So imagine if there were, 100 companies that would match that commitment, we would almost be addressing all the water stressed basins in the world. And that's why we're actually working with the World Resilience Coalition. So it's a coalition we founded a year ago with 6 companies. Now there are 18 companies across sectors that are part of that. And what we want to do is to define kind of common priority areas where we can work together to replenish those basins. And I think that's extraordinary because that really touches upon, so many different sectors that have water as a business priority, including manufacturing, including the textile industry. They're all there. So we think that if we put our forces together to do that, we can really start accelerating the process of addressing these issues. So I hope I kind of answered that question in terms of the again, the local, water is local. Our commitment and commitments should be local too. So I explained a little bit how we go about that and matching our areas of operations. But I want to add that time matters as much as place. And this is something that we learned in the past year, because the demand for water, the quality and supply of water varies over time, even in the same place. And our experts learned that to account for this temporal variability is very important when you think about your water strategy. For example, in a given location, during the summer months, you have better water quality, or you had heavy rains in a different month. So when we established our water availability target, what should we go for? Our experts considered both the annual baseline of the water stress as well as the monthly baseline for water stress. And this just makes that target more accurate. It makes it more challenging as well. But it's important to, in our view, to have the right math behind, putting forward those targets and making sure the replenishment work really reflects this, natural nuances. Did I address all the questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And Matthias also said thank you in particular for that answer on the calculation of the water positivity objective. But I see Mauro wanted to come in. Please do. That's the idea, that you chip in where you feel.
Thank you. If I can chip in, there were, I think, twice, Adina, her last intervention, she mentioned the aspects of collaboration. And I think that's something perhaps I should also stress, because early on you asked me about research project, and I mentioned 3 of those. And they were the typical case where you have water specialists, water technology specialists, working together with textile companies. This is by far the most interesting aspects of the work we have been experiencing in the last 5-10 years when it comes to water and textile businesses. You have it at political level, and I remember also with Dirk and the platform, we've been having meetings trying to have these aspects coming together and trying to understand what is the needs that you have. Why don't you buy, for instance, that type of water technologies, or why don't you try to reuse part of it? And then only when you actually go into the research project, you learn about the complexity of these things. And then you find out amazing things. For instance, that a technology developed in the Netherlands, which is fantastic on a lab scale, or it works perfectly in Turkey with a certain type of products and raw materials, it turned out that it doesn't work in a company, let's say in Portugal, because that company has a different level of acidity in the water, or maybe because of an industrial symbiosis, receive another raw material from another company in the cement industry, which changed the type of water they have. So only when you have the experts on one industry and the expert on the other industry, you do the trials, you understand what the costs are, you calculate the variability, and you have a business plan, and you see, okay, installing that technology would be paying back in 5 years, 3 years, or in 20 years. In the last case, of course, it's a no-go case, because in our time, it's not affordable. In other cases, it might even work if the local, perhaps, authority, which is what we experience in Croatia, chip in and support an investment in a company, even maybe providing land or permit at a higher speed. So the whole point I want to make here is that if we talk about water technologies and other industry sectors, and I learned the same from the digital industry, it's absolutely crucial to have the technical experts sitting together in the same boardroom or meeting room with the industry expert and understand the nitty-gritty, and that actually takes months. It's not something you do in one meeting or in 2. But this aspect of collaboration across the value chain, in our opinion, it's fundamentally important to have innovation going in the right direction. I want to stress this.
Yeah, and I think you're building a perfect bridge. I think what I want to do is, first of all, thank all those who have asked questions. Let them keep coming in. There are questions coming in as we speak. But I want to take back a little bit the discussion to center around the next, let's say, stage of our thinking. We have talked a lot about challenges, current situation, what is the diversity that you find yourselves in your sector. But I want to now look look forward a little bit. I mean, we heard Commissioner Sinkevicius talking about the European Green Deal, the systemic approach on climate, circularity, biodiversity, pollution. And there is, as you know, there is a system thinking here, but there is also a very high level of ambition. We have, if we look up for the future into 2050, we have very clear and ambitious targets. We have climate neutrality. We have wanted to establish a clean and circular economy. We want to halt the biodiversity loss and address a number of the main challenges. There have been also targets in the biodiversity strategy for 2030 already. And we have just set out a zero pollution vision. I mean, these are all long-term perspectives that provide a pathway, that provide an idea, that provide a kind of a narrative that we want to unite everybody around from the European Commission point of view. And if you now see this for your sector, and we're starting, of course, to translate that, how do you see that? How does that affect your sector? Because I think on one hand, of course, there are specific problems here and there, but there will be a transformation going on. I mean, our president is always talking about the green and digital transformation. So how do you see that, looking at your sector? What are the opportunities in that for the sector? I think there are all sorts of challenges along the way, I'm quite sure. But I think there certainly must be also now a preparation in the sector that prepares for these opportunities. So maybe if I start with Mauro, what do you see with this policy agenda coming? What do you see how the textile sector can make use of this opportunity, and how do you see the textile sector transforming in the light of that policy direction?
Joachim, it's you nail it down to the current situation. I think we never had environmental subjects or sustainability subjects more than environmental as high in the agenda of the EU Commission as with the Ursula von der Leyen Commission. And we never had textile as high in the agenda as with this Commission either. So it's like a perfect storm or a star alignment, whatever you want to call it. In textile, we're going to have the first EU textile strategy, also called Strategy for Sustainable Textiles, by the end of this year. There's an ongoing public consultation open, deadline 4th of August, because policymakers, EU policymakers, want to change the way how textile is made, consumed, and recycled for what matters. So it's the highest level. And we honestly, in all honesty, we really much welcome that, because our industry is impacted and targeted by many different regulations, such as REACH, such as the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, Sustainable Product Initiatives, product environmental footprint, and I can due diligence. I can go on taxonomy. I can go on for until people start to drop out of the call. So there is so much happening that we need to make some sort of we need to have some sort of coherence in these objectives, and we hope that the EU textile strategy will also guarantee that one hand does not sort of demolish what the other hand is building up. And that's very important. We talk about political coherence, because if you only look at the specific objective, you might find the perfect solution, but that comes at the expenses of other objectives. And I can give a very short examples. I mean, what I learned myself a few days ago negotiating a new threshold emission in the BREF with the member states authorities, you have a substance called formaldehyde. You can even treat it in a better way, but then you need to use massive amount of water. So you have something called cross-media effect, that you can save very much on one sort of substance or resource, but that comes at the expense of another one. And the same goes for anything. I mean, you can use enormous quantity of energy that maybe in an area is not sort of green energy to improve water treatments, but that release more CO2 emission than you actually would like to have released. So what I'm trying to say is that we should refrain from the temptation of looking at a very small dot and say, that's what we need to fix it now, today, immediately, without looking at the bigger pictures. Because microplastic is important, water is important, recycling is important, long-lasting product is important, everything is important. So either we make some coherence in how EU policymakers treat all these things, or we run the risk that we try to achieve everything we have a very ambitious agenda, and we fail. Or we put so much pressure that you simply don't produce a product here, you move to Ukraine, which is across the border with Poland, but it doesn't have that regulation. So we have a high ambitious agenda. We are happy of that. My association, we developed a circular textile strategy already 2 years ago. So we have made more than 12 proposals on how to help on this, including also water reuse. We need to work together with the policymakers to make sure we find the right problems and we have implementable solutions to those problems. I hope that answers your question. And if not, please tell me where.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to get a better sense, because I must say I'm not an expert in your sector, but I mean, would you say, if you're looking at the 160,000 companies that you work with, that the textile sector is ready for that, for this long-term achieving these long-term objectives? Is this innovative potential there that people are starting to embrace that agenda, or is it more a defensive attitude, saying wait and see what they come up with, and then we'll go along if we have to?
There's not really much wait and see, because you cannot afford in this industry a wait and see approach, because things happen so quickly. I mean, you change in garments, you change collection every 3 months. It used to be twice a year. Now it's gone. In technical textile, you have new technologies, new products, continuous. So wait and see does not apply. Not even to the small and medium-sized enterprises, which I didn't mention, but it's 90% of the size of our industry. I mean, here we talk with Microsoft, which is a giant, of course. We have a few giants in our sectors, but 99% of our companies are companies with 10 employees. And you can imagine a company with, let's say, 50 employees. How do they deal with those ambitions? So to your question, Jochen, are they ready or are they in a defense approach? There is ambitious, there are programs. As I mentioned at the very beginning, you want to make this a competitive advantage, but you can't do this alone. You need some support from the policymakers. You need to discuss with technical experts from the water or other sectors. So it's both. You want to go for that because it's going to be better for your children, everything we know, and your also competitiveness, but it has to be done in the right way. So it's not the what, it's the how you actually do and how the policymakers make policy. If you're going to play with a stick, it's going to be a problem. If you're going to find a more carrot approach, it's going to be easier, of course. So it's in the how you will do that.
Great, thanks, Mauro. I want to have the same question to Adina, because I think you probably, from your perspective, have a different outlook on it. I mean, from also global company, you see now what is happening in Europe. Of course, there are developments in the world that pick up the same type of long-term narrative. We of course have the Paris Agreement. We have the biodiversity COP coming up. How does Microsoft see this policy agenda? We have an ICT sector again very much in the focus for the first time that much on the environment agenda, like the textiles. What does Microsoft make out of this policy ambition?
Yeah, thank you. We think it's extraordinary, and the EU is showing just tremendous leadership in trying to build that consistency, and asking about what it means for our sector. I think it just goes to the heart of how our sector can make a more meaningful contributions to supporting all the other sectors, like the one Mauro is representing. Feel confident and have the right tools to make that transition. So it's a lot about understanding how we can support it. Also working with all of you and policymakers to see how you see our role, what we can do better in terms of making sure that twin transition is practical and real, and what does it mean in practice. I think the European Green Digital Coalition that was put together to really start understanding and calculating and bring that science-based understanding of what is the impact of digital solutions on the environmental footprint reductions in different sectors. We're all really encouraged to see that. We're part of the founding companies. We want to work closely with the other coalition members to to make that a really interesting and credible piece, because we think different industries need more support and more trust in terms of sometimes taking that steps. You know, if you think about the resilience and recovery plans, you have 20% digital, 37% green. Are they coming together? Are they not? How can we make sure they are? And some of those investments actually go towards this twin transition. And perhaps if there is a greater understanding of that net impact that digital solutions might have, that, you know, that adoption of digital technology might be accelerated. So we definitely see that as an opportunity. We also see it as an opportunity for global leadership, because ultimately we need that, you know, cooperation across the Atlantic, across regions to tackle some of these issues. And maybe one thing, you know, we're just going back on the ICT and the contribution. You know, let's think about how can data make a more meaningful contribution. So we've seen and are encouraged by the EU's plans to create a common European Green Deal data space to kind of harness all that potential. This is something that we think is extraordinary, but again, there are a lot of data challenges to make sure that data is useful for policymaking, data is useful for industries to make the right insights. And we've been looking a little bit specifically, because we're talking about water data has kind of specific challenges as well. It's kind of segmented and siloed. It sometimes lacks context. It has lots of discontinuities in terms of how it has been recorded. So digitizing the water data and make sure it's credible, it's transparent, it's useful, both to policymakers and the industries that are transforming, and make that data actionable, you know, we think is an important next step in kind of supporting all the other sectors of the economy, just make the most of ICT in that transformation. So maybe I'll stop here and see if there are questions to that.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And you gave me the perfect segue to slowly go into the third topic we want to discuss a bit more detail. It's innovation and digitization being a central part of innovation, how we can make use of that. Maybe just to the audience, we have got roughly another half an hour left for discussion, which is great. So I'm gonna have another round now with my speakers on particular on this innovation, digitization opportunities. But please send your questions in, because we want to spend the last 10, 15 minutes that we have then coming back to your questions and making sure that as many of them can be answered. But building on what you just said, Adina, I think you build on something that is also very much in the heart of the agenda. I've mentioned already President von der Leyen, as well as my commissioner, regularly repeat that the digital and green transition have to be brought together. And for that, for instance, we have published a paper on digital solutions for zero pollution. And it is so clear that a lot of things are happening, but at the same time, there are also a lot of obstacles why certain things are not going as fast, the transformation is not going as fast, why the investments in all the digital solutions are probably not as let's say, creating as much results as we would like to see. So from your perspective now, if we look at this agenda, what can we do? You mentioned a few examples already. What can we do to overcome these challenges? I think you mentioned a lot on collaboration earlier, but it's bringing different people together. So how can Microsoft help for the water sector that we use this innovative power of digital solutions?
Yeah, so just building on some of the challenges we have around water data, it's all about kind of building, building sharing sharing platforms for that data, you know, trusted platforms. I think that that's particularly critical, especially for, you know, water, that, you know, it's a resource that cuts across multiple sectors, multiple industries. You need that kind of open data sharing to make sure that you have the most kind of meaningful and actionable insights. So that's, you know, that's one. It is all about collaboration. It's coming together and thinking, what is the priority data that needs to be shared? You know, what is the taxonomy? How do we make sure we put the right kind of governance in place to make sure we can do that, and everyone that has the data and wants to share the data can do that in a meaningful way. I mean, one way we've been doing it at Microsoft, kind of building on that, is through our AI for Earth program. This is something that we started a couple of years ago, where you know, scientists were kind of working in their separate, you know, offices and universities on certain problems. A lot of the data was analog, so we were providing them with the AI solutions and cloud. So our cloud is called Azure, so Azure credits, to make sure that they can, you know, put that data online, and we were providing them with kind of learning capabilities to make sure that they can, you know, measure, assess, and get the right insights. But while we were working on this program, we realized that some scientists in the UK or Germany could benefit from sharing their data together. So that kind of has led to this new idea of a planetary computer that we've announced last year and that we're working on, which is about creating that platform. And maybe it's something similar. It sounds like it's something similar that what EU is trying to do on the Green Deal data spaces. It's really trying to put the data of all those different scientists and NGOs and research institutes that we're already collaborating with, and kind of onboarding new data sources like satellite data and so on, to make sure that this is a platform that everyone can use and the data is shared in the same way. And you know, we're kind of trying to go a step further and making sure that this is helpful for conservation. This is helpful for even a citizen that wants to know what their ecosystem around their home is about and what are the challenges. So it's a little bit like a search engine for conservation. Instead of searching with a keyword, you would search with a region, for example, and know what the status is. So working on these ideas and bringing the data and the ideas and data sets together, I think that's definitely key. And how to do that, I think it's a question for all of us, you know, coming together and trying to see what are the best ways and platforms. And it's probably not just one way. There are different trusted platforms that we can think about. And I guess the second question is how do we make that interoperable as well? Because I assume there will be those kind of big platforms all around the world. How do we make sure that they can work with each other and they're helpful to each other?
Yeah. No, and maybe just briefly to say is that the European data spaces, in particular the Green Deal data space, and there are others in agriculture, transport, and so on. I think the idea is not to create one mega platform that is managed by the European Commission. It's directed to inspire everybody, including the initiatives that you're doing, to follow a certain philosophy and certain rules when it comes to data, on Green Deal data or environment data. That of course they should be available for each other, so they should be open, they should be interoperable, and so that is why I think we're rather looking at setting a framework. That's why we have proposed the Data Governance Act rather than creating another database that is managed by one or the other. And I think that's great that we see this embracing already from Microsoft and the digital sector. But throwing the ball back to Mauro, so you hear all these digital solutions coming along. What does the textile sector think of that? Is that a big topic already? Is it coming more and more? How much can that be factored into being part of the innovative drive that will come in the textile sector when it comes to finding environmental solutions and water-related solutions?
I mean, digital solutions are definitely one of the most important enabler of the transition the transformation that this industry is pursuing across all the spectrums. It goes a lot through the issue of data which are captured by the machines, the textile machine manufacturer, which are not the machine that used to be made like 30 or 20 years ago. So the whole issue of data management, data monitoring, data processing, it's a fundamentally important aspect which goes through the need to modernize and innovate the company. Because many companies, especially in Europe, as I was mentioning, are small and medium-sized enterprises. They exist for generation. They are the third, fourth generation of the family-run business. So when you have to innovate an existing plant which exists for decades, it's a different story than if you're going to build a new brand plant from scratch. So you need to have a lot of instruments and tools to connect the machines, to get the data and to analyze those data. So that's definitely one example of that. Then you have also a very important aspect, which is data exchange, which is a completely different story. Our value chain, it's global. Even if you produce a B part component of your product in Europe, you might import a raw material from Egypt or from China or from God knows where, and you sell to the next steps farther in the supply chain to the United States. So it's a very global value chain, and you need companies across the value chain to exchange information. What are the product characteristics? What are the chemicals in? What are the workers' conditions? Do you have private labels certifying that due diligence has been taken care of? Now, how you process the data from one sort of link of the chain to the next one? Do you have interoperability across the systems, or every company has a proprietary system and company A does not understand what company B is doing because they use different data format? It seems a very technical aspect, but it's fundamentally important. Like all of us are speaking English now, we're speaking the same language and we understand each other, even if I am of a different country of yours. But if you don't have the same or harmonized language in digital data exchange in a global value chain, it's just impossible to trace down. And so the word here is traceability, which is a fundamentally important aspect of our value chains, to ensure transparency in the production processes, to ensure compliance with legislation, to give your customer or your partner in the business value chain the information that he needs to have. So again, data processing is not data generation monitoring. And then you have the whole world of digital technologies applied to the production processes. Automation, industrial automation is a fundamentally important frontier to reduce the labor costs, for instance. So these are all important aspects. Companies are keen to engage in that. It's reassuring to see that so much funds of the EU recovery plan should be dedicated to both the green and digital transition. The question is, of course, will the small and medium-sized enterprises be able to access to this resource, or would that be difficult for them to process this resource? I hope I answer your point on the needs, and I end with this question: how can we access also part of this transformation and funds to help this transformation? That is, of course, an important point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that now when we come to the recovery phase after, hopefully we're all on the pathway out of the pandemic, I think this will be a discussion that will continue to be there at the European level, at the global level, but also with the member states who are currently all preparing or have prepared already their draft or finalizing their recovery and resilience plans. So I think that's really a good moment to mention that. Before bringing in the questions again, I know that you're also keen to answer still some of the questions, but before I'll go back to the questions, just maybe one last question to wrap up this digital and innovation part. We are at the Water Innovation Conference here, and you're all part of Water Europe's activities. And you mentioned both the importance of collaboration. If you now look forward for the next 5 to 10 years, what is the value of that type of platform, of that type of collaboration platform that Water Europe offers, and what would you expect from it, from your sector, when it comes to innovation, to digitization? Is there something that you wanna share in terms of giving a little bit of expectation towards the organizers here when they're starting to develop the next what did they say, 5-year strategy or objectives soon, I understand. Let me start with Adina, then Mauro can think a little bit longer, because I see he was reflecting on the good. Adina, I'll start with you and then Mauro can come in, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Microsoft is pretty new to Water Europe. So we're kind of, we've joined in September as part of our water positive commitment and as part of our commitment to use, you know, our voice more, you know, in collaboration with others and address some of these issues. So we're still learning. I think we've got a lot to learn from Water Europe before kind of making those informed suggestions. But we've been really impressed by their leadership, their focus on kind of new and innovative technologies and digitizing data, and just the understanding of the value of data and putting that the value of water, I'm sorry, not data, and putting that value on it. And it's something that I think if we manage as a group to get across and include in both our work, our businesses, our policy making, and you know, in a more meaningful way, then I think that responsibility for different sectors and that call to action will become much clearer. So it's something that we look forward to work with Water Europe going forward, and just we're just grateful for everything we've learned from them, because we're pretty new to water policy. You know, we're almost 1 year old in kind of getting immersed into this space. So we're really happy to be part of this group.
Mauro.
Yes, from my side, I mean, as similarly to Adina, I mean, there has to be also learning exercise from our side on this platform vision and an operational way to implement that vision. And perhaps learning is always mutually interesting, I would assume. There is already a history of collaboration between the water industry, the textile industry, at the level of the platform here represented, from the technology platforms to the association, as I was mentioning before. Always very interesting meetings, always you step outside the rooms with more knowledge than you had before. Then you say, okay, I know what they meant here. So the learning is definitely very important. And then I think as our companies, as I was mentioning before, are exposed to more pressure and also potentially more opportunities, I think anything that we can bring to our companies, and I stress it, small and medium-sized enterprises, at make it very simple to access, to understand this basic concept. Any tool that you can give to a company to understand, okay, this is what the issue is today, these are the cost structure today, how that would change, how can I be empowered to make a decision or to evaluate technologies or changes in a simple way. Anything which can simplify that, I think it would be tremendously useful for the businesses that we represent, but also for the providers of those technologies.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we have exactly a good amount of time left that we can go through the questions again. And I was looking again from those who came in. Please let them come in. There's no problem. We'll try to answer as many as possible. But with the first question, I have a question on the first question because it's actually addressed to me. It says to the senior advisor from the European Commission, so what are your plans to become water positive by 2030? A good question, but what do you mean by me? By me in my household here at home, or the European Commission, or do you mean the EU policy in terms of water quantity management? Would be interesting to know. Happy to elaborate. I'm not sure I have all the analysis for my household ready to be able to show whether I can actually become water positive as a single household. But the interesting question. Please do come back if you wouldn't mind clarifying. But that gives us the possibility to move in the meantime on to the question from Violetta Mikaite to Mauro about EU legislation. So in the discussion earlier, we were elaborating a little bit about euros, etc. So she asks, do you mean European legislation is a barrier for the textile industry? And how do you see the fact that EU legislation actually sets measures to protect the environment, for instance, in relation to water, pollution, and so on and so forth? Mauro, you wanna react to that?
With pleasure. I did read that question. It's a very good one. And it was also a point that we read about, would you swim on a river by a textile plant? Let me clearly say, people do this. And people have their children going to school, which drink the water. That it's the same water coming from the river. So in the industry we represent, I mean, you have, as I was mentioning before, traditional textile districts, which do all sorts of things in many regions of Europe. It is not that you are a businessman and then you just build a plant in the opposite part of the world and you don't care about what happened. I mean, people live actually in the areas where they produce in many cases. Maybe they have also factories outside Europe, but they do swim or drink that water. So it is important because all of us have seen disturbing images of waters, of rivers, which change their color in some parts of the world. Well, that's not something you do see in Europe, unless it's a wastewater treatment plants, very clearly. You used to see this centuries ago, or maybe decades ago, but you don't see that today. It's because authorities come over and shut you down immediately. So that's important to be known. Now, on the other part of the question, is it a barrier for textile? It can very well be. I mean, I think we don't have to be naive. Anything which raises the bars, put more pressure. And then you must be equipped to deal with that pressure. And the industry is not saying, no, we don't deal with that. But we expect, as I mentioned before, everybody to play with the same rules. If you sell in the EU market territory, you should all respect the regulation for that. If you're a state and you're buying textile products, similar question on before to you, Jochen, why is the state not considering sustainability criteria? Why is still price, for instance, most of the times if you buy sheet in a hospital in Copenhagen or in Catania or God knows where, normally price is the biggest element to choose. Nobody asks, where is the product made? Yeah. Do you use organic cotton? Do you use recycled polyester? What chemicals do you have? Do people care about these things? Well, the state is making regulation. The same state mobilized 14% of the EU GDP based on an OECD study. So perhaps we should also have the carrot approach. That's what I meant, not only the stick one, because legislation can be a barrier, but it can also be a very powerful driver for these changes. So we want to transform this industry as much as we do, but let's do it together. Let's not just put prejudice in front of us or let's a target and I don't care how this target is achieved. So let's work together on that.
Yeah. Now you make a good point, Mauro. I think public procurement, if you take that as an example, is really one issue that we also have identified as needing further attention if we want to get the Green Deal a reality. That applies to the textile sector as it applies to ICT projects in the public sector. I think that awareness is now there, but you're quite right that it's not trickled down into concrete demands or criteria from the public sector in all areas to then procure in a green way. And I just heard recently in another discussion that price indeed is still the predominant factor when it comes to such issues. So certainly an important area to look into. Thanks for that. I think that was clear, and I want to keep the questions coming in, so to say, and ask them to you. And Violetta had a question also for Adina. So Adina, she asks, what is Microsoft doing for water industry, and what is the strategic collaboration or partnership plan that you have to cooperate with the water sector specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So that goes to, some of the use cases and how we're kind of empowering our customers from the water sector. So there are a few kind of solution areas. Let's say one is to understand the water-related risks due to climate change. That's one area where we're supporting our customers. One is around monitoring and data to reduce water use. One is around understanding what's happening in an ecosystem to make smarter decisions about water in a certain area. and improve water quality and conservation. And just a few examples. We're working with Ecolab. They have a tool called the Water Monetizer. So what they're doing is to make sure that water consumption for the businesses they support has a value, and that the businesses understand the water risks as part of their how they calculate any other monetary risks in their companies. So we're supporting Ecolab with their solution. We're supporting companies like Schneider Electric in Europe on solutions for water and wastewater management through their supply chains, through their water cycles, through smart water technology. So some of these solutions are, solution areas are really endless. I also want to mention how we're funding innovation in this space, because there is a need for more solutions, and solutions that, emerging technologies that don't exist today. And we've put forward a climate innovation fund as a company. So we're investing in emerging solutions, both on the carbon removal side, but a part of it is invested in water solutions. So we've put $10 million in what's called the Emerald Technology Ventures and the Global Water Impact Fund. And those are early stage or expansion stage companies from around the world that work on emerging technologies and market adoption, because many times you do need that boost, right, to scale and become viable as an emerging technology. So they work on water conservation solutions, water efficiency, working on solutions that can reduce carbon emissions when you do water treatment, when you do climate adaptation solutions. And this fund that we're working with is one of the only funds in the world that is focused on emerging water technologies. So it's a pretty niche area. There are more investments in other solutions such as carbon and carbon removal, but there's less investment in emerging technologies around water, and that's why we're investing in that space.
Thanks a lot. And building on that, also, Adina, to you, I would first ask, maybe also then Mauro knows as well or can come in if he has some information. But there was a question from Harald Kutalau, and he asks, is there any paper or platform for big data for water use in Europe or in any country? And where can I find such information?
Like a research paper or?
Well, I think it's more about finding the data themselves. So like we talked about the data space itself, whether there is already, let's say, accessible data. I must say, I was thinking myself, I was not immediately aware, but maybe also somebody from Water Europe can help in the chat if they know. Specifically, I am personally not aware. Adina, you have any hint for our listener?
Not. I cannot think of what could be the most useful, but I can check with our experts. But we do have some of our own kind of information around what we're doing and some of the challenges with big data in this space, but not something that I can think of that we have done with partners. But I'm happy to check and come back.
Mauro, do you know any?
Likewise, is not our immediate focus of activities. I'm aware that there are databases across member states on, for instance, releases of certain chemical substances due to the manufacturing of some of the plants, but they're maybe quite specific and they are national level. So I wouldn't be able to perhaps chip in with anything more than that.
And I think it's good that, to everybody participating, listening, I think it's good that you drive this demand. I think it's good to know which demand and interest is out there in terms of data. And I guess this is really what the conference is all about and what Water Euro is all about, to connect these interests with those who have some information, who have some suggestions in terms of addressing these questions. Last question I would then take here before we start wrapping up is from Michael Blind. I would say it's probably to both of you. Interesting question is following the carbon border adjustment mechanism. What are your views on a water border adjustment mechanism? This could level somehow the price issue. So a bit like the global issues, we have disparities. How can we create a more level playing field? Something that will be very much discussed on carbon border adjustment mechanism very soon when the Fit for 55 package comes from the European Commission. Anybody has any views on this? Interesting question. I must also reflect a little bit about it. I have not so far, I must be honest, but maybe you have some views on this. Anybody wants to come in?
Well, we had a discussion within our membership because Euratex is basically a national member state association coming together and expressing their voice in Brussels. So we have a discussion within our membership on this CBIM, carbon border adjustment mechanism function and how it could work. There are, I would say, different views because I think many question is what is the implementability, the usability in practice? How can that work? That's already one question. What would be the impact outside Europe of this kind of mechanism? It could be retaliatory systems in one way or the other. Would it actually fit to its goal? So it's a new kind of instrument in principle. I'm not even sure that in the scope of textiles, for instance, so textile could fit in the scope of the carbon one. And the water would be even a more specific one than the carbon, which is already fairly measured and monitored through the ETS schemes and many other systems. So, I mean, in principle, we are open to discuss any policy options, but again, there always have to be a case-by-case, sector-by-sector assessment. And perhaps when it comes to the major rationale behind this, it's having harmonized rule. Maybe there can also be other systems to ensure that there is a level playing field, which are more simple to be run. That's just early thoughts on this question of yours.
Excellent. Adina, any thoughts on this? And then we start wrapping up the session.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting question. I think it boils down to having common standards in the end, and that standard setting. And we think that we do need to come across across sectors, across industries to define those common sustainability units and methods of measurement. On water, on carbon, on waste, to make sure that we all follow the same definitions. And if we do have the same standards, then it's easier to start thinking about building a playing field. And then, as Mauro said, we do need a coordinated policy regime, a globally coordinated one. But I think thinking about the specific standards in all these kind of different sustainability areas, such as water, is maybe a starting point in this space. But yeah, it's all about kind of consistency and how do we get there?
Wonderful. So the time has been running. I mean, I didn't even realize that we have already 19 minutes spoken about all these topics. We originally had only 1 hour, so we've really spent the time in a very interactive and interesting dialogue, which I hope was also interesting for all our viewers. Before I close, I will ask you both, and you can have a minute to think about it, to summarize in 1 minute, what is the main messages you want the viewers to take away? So now that the conference is off to a good start. But I mean, from my side, it has been very rich. I think we hope we have been able to answer most of the questions. Apologies if we missed some. And I think I can already say there were some questions already. How can I contact the speakers? I think you can certainly do that via the conference platform now and via Water Europe. I think both speakers would be certainly delighted to stay in touch and elaborate in more detail in direct exchanges. But that already gives me a feedback that at least there was a high interest in the topics that we've touched upon. And so to leave the audience with let's say, your main message, may I ask first Mauro and then Adina to give us the first, their single one most important message from this discussion that they want everybody to take home with. Mauro.
Yes, I got 10 seconds less to think about the final message, but I'm fine with that. No, I think that, I guess, what it comes out of this three sector discussion, you have the water, the digital, the textile, is that in the case of our industry sectors, there is a transformation which is happening, which is there for many reasons. So the way this business is being doing now is not what it used to be done 15 or 20 years ago. So there has to be a consciousness of that. And the question is, what can be done to facilitate, to help, to accelerate that transformation? What do we need to learn about the other sectors that we don't know at all? We think we know, but maybe we don't. What are the best way of finding a solution? I think, how can we help an ongoing transformation? It's not about changing people's mind or changing business mind. Businesses is doing certain things. Policymakers are doing certain things. What do we need to learn to make it go faster, better at a systemic level? So how can we help a transformation? I think that should be in the mindset of many people engaged in these policy-making discussions.
Thanks, Mauro. Adina.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for a really rich conversation. I think as final thoughts, there are many remaining challenges, a lot of opportunities ahead where we feel digital technology can play an important role. Clearly, this decade in front of us is the decade that we need to use all that opportunity, make the most of that, put our ambition, paired with the action to make the most of these opportunities. We want to take that responsibility. We want to work with others to listen and understand how we can support the other sector, accelerate that transition. Partnerships are so important across sectors, businesses, across governments to do that. And ultimately, just agreeing with Mauro, that system change will be very important. So as we drive change, let's scale it and make sure we create those systems that will be kind of the backbone of our let's say, water positive economies after 2030 and beyond. So thank you so much for this great conversation with both of you today, and to everyone that listened in and asked really interesting questions. So thank you.
Thanks to you, Adina. Thanks to you, Mauro. I think it was really a pleasure. You've made my job very easy. It was a really rich and interesting discussion. And also from a policy perspective, from the European Commission, you touched upon the main issues. We are in a transformation. We're in this together. And that is why the conference, the Water Innovation Conference and Water Europe play such an important role. So, Dirk, I see you're back online. Bring you in. Are you happy with the discussion? Did you take something away, or you have questions remaining? I hand over to you. You're the master of ceremony.
Really, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panelists for this excellent discussion. I think, there were too many gemstones in this discussion to summarize them all. But a few key messages I really took, which are also at the heart of Water Europe, which is all about collaboration, partnership, and system change. I think that's really what we have to work to, and we have to do this with all the actors involved in the water value chain, because really, as the theme of this session said, water is also your business. I mean, that goes for industries, that goes for utilities, that goes for solution providers. It also goes for policymakers. Yeah, we all have to work together to bring about, I would say, a European water smart society and a paradigm change that will allow it to make that happen. Really, a very good discussion. I already have some very good feedback. So once more, thank you to you all. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the other speakers of this morning. So, of course, Commissioner Sinkevicius for his, I would say, very inspirational opening speech, where he, I would say, briefly summarized all the key elements with regard to European water relevant policy. Of course, Water Europe President Thomas Michel, Andres Lucht for introducing one of the awards, well, Joachim, Adina, of course, Mauro, excellent speech. And of course, once more, I want to congratulate MEP Christoph Hansen, but also Wim Oudenaard from AM team for the Digital Innovation Award that they have won. This afternoon, we will continue with a side event of the European Water Alliance, which will really be also on a similar theme, where we also address water is also your business. Then zooming less into the industries, but more making clear to all Water Europe commissioners the efforts that we have done there to show them that water is really important also in their different portfolios. That we will explain this afternoon. And then tomorrow we will continue with the theme Water Smart Industry for EU Competitiveness, where we once more have lined up, I would say, a few excellent speakers and a very interesting panel. So I hope you'll be joining us again this afternoon at 8 o'clock. And otherwise, I hope we will be able to meet again tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and we will continue with Water Innovation Europe 2021. Once more, thank you all, and I look forward to meeting you again either this afternoon or tomorrow. Thank you.